I'm Sarah. I'm 42. And last May, my mother called me with a casual question about selling a house. I didn't think much of it. Then I realized they'd been planning to sell it without me for months. They'd been planning it during my best friend's funeral. They'd been planning it while my little cousin got married and cut me out of her wedding party. And the only reason I found out was because my cousin Brooke got nervous and talked too much during a phone call, and I started asking questions instead of accepting answers. I screenshotted everything, the group chats, the county records, the deed filed 8 years ago that nobody in my family even knew existed. And 3 weeks after the wedding I wasn't invited to, I sent one message into the family group chat. I know about the house. My name is on the deed. The closing won't happen. Your attorney will explain the rest. The group went dead for 2 hours. Then the calls started, 7 and 15 minutes. But here's what none of them thought to check. A brass key I've carried for 8 years, and a document filed at the county recorder's office that proved my grandmother loved me more than any of them ever bothered to notice. 47 messages showed me where I stood in my family. One recorded deed showed them where the ground actually was. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters for what comes next. I'm a structural engineer. I design load pads for bridges and parking garages and the occasional hospital wing. I've been licensed for 9 years, and I spend about 40% of my time on the road, staying in hotels, eating dinner alone, billing hours. I'm good at my job. I'm good at it because I'm patient with details and I don't skip steps. Those are qualities my family has never once found interesting. I live in Portland. I've built a life there. I have a daughter who's 16. I have a mortgage I can manage. I have a job that pays well enough that I don't have to ask anyone for help. I have stability. And yet for 42 years I've been invisible to the people who raised me. Until I wasn't. Until I discovered that my grandmother had filed a document that changed everything. Until I found proof that someone loved me more than they cared about their own comfort. Until I realized that quiet people have power. I didn't realize it at the time. When my mother called that Tuesday in May with her light voice asking about selling the house, I didn't know I was about to become a different version of myself. I didn't know that a county database would prove my worth more clearly than any family dinner ever could. I didn't know that a key I'd carried for 8 years was actually a legal document waiting for the moment I'd need it. All I knew was that my best friend was dead. My little cousin had just told me I was a disappointment. And my family was planning something in the shadows that would explain everything I'd never understood about why I was always on the outside looking in. 3 weeks later, that would all change. One message, one keystroke, one moment of refusing to be quiet anymore. But first, I need to take you back. I need to tell you how I got here. I need to explain the architecture of being forgotten, the way it builds over years until it's so solid you don't even notice you're living inside a prison of your own construction. Welcome to Dramatic Revenge Stories. Stories about ordinary people who got tired of being extraordinary only for people who didn't deserve them. Stories about the moment you stop being the bridge and become the wall. Stories about what happens when quiet people discover they have power. If you've ever been the cousin they planned around, the sister they forgot about, the one they assumed was too broken or too poor to fight back, this one's for you. This is the story of Sarah Chen, a structural engineer who discovered that the most load-bearing structures aren't made of steel and concrete. They're made of legal documents filed at county recorders' offices. They're made of keys your grandmother gave you before you understood why they mattered. They're made of love that comes with paperwork instead of words. This is the story of the moment I stopped apologizing for taking. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio, I was the middle child who turned in homework on time, while my older brother Nathan played varsity baseball, and my younger sister Brooke did pageants. Mom drove them to events. Dad cheered from the stands. I rode my bike to the library and taught myself to love things that didn't require an audience. That was fine. I told myself busy people get forgotten, and I kept telling myself that for years. It became a comfortable story, a way to make sense of the silence. Other families were loud and messy, and everyone knew where they stood. My family was just busy. Everyone had their thing. Mine was just to show up quietly when needed. I sent Christmas gifts on time every year. I booked the restaurant for my mother's birthday 3 years running. Always the same restaurant. Always the same date they'd mentioned casually 2 months prior. Always perfect because I'd remembered and planned ahead. When my father needed his truck moved for surgery, I drove 6 hours on a Thursday to do it. Drove it, waited in the driveway, left it running with the keys in the ignition. Drove back to Portland in a rental. Never asked for gas money, never asked for thanks. When the roof at their house leaked during a storm and Nathan was too busy to check it, I called the roofer from a job site in Kentucky. I called him, got the estimate, paid the deposit over the phone with my credit card, and called my mother back within an hour. Roofer's coming Tuesday, they'll send you the invoice. She said thank you, but not the kind of thank you that means anything. The kind that's just a polite closing to a conversation. I never asked to be thanked. I just assumed that being useful was the same as being included. That if you showed up reliably, if you didn't ask for much, if you solved problems without making noise, eventually someone would notice. Eventually someone would say, "We see you, you matter." By the time I was 42, I'd been divorced for 4 years and was rebuilding my life as a single mother with a teenage daughter, a good job at a tech company, and a mortgage I could manage on my own. I was stable. I was solid. I was the reliable one, and I was still invisible. I was the person they called when they needed something solved. I was the person they forgot when they were celebrating something. I was the infrastructure, like the bridges I designed, necessary but not noticed until something goes wrong. The load-bearing wall nobody thinks about until the house starts to fall apart. I'd learned early that showing up meant nothing if nobody was looking. I'd learned that being useful was a trap that looked like love. I'd learned that the people who raise you can look right through you for decades and still call it family. But I kept showing up anyway. That was what I did. That was who I was. The reliable one. The one who solved problems and disappeared. I didn't know yet that this pattern would be my salvation. I didn't know that my reliability had taught me patience, that my invisibility had taught me to notice what others missed, that my willingness to show up quietly had given me the structural engineering skills that would help me examine the load distribution of my family's lies. I didn't know that I was actually the foundation, and that foundations, once examined closely, can support or destroy everything built on top of them. My cousin Loretta, my little sister, really, though technically she's my cousin, got engaged in early 2025. I was happy for her, genuinely happy. She called me with the news, and I answered without hesitation. I would be at the wedding. I promised her that. It was in May, months away, and I would find a way to be there. Loretta had been like a sister to me since the day she was born. When she was born, I was 23 and working my first job as a structural engineer in Portland. She was born in Vancouver, 5 hours away by car, a straight shot up I-5. To me, she might as well have been born in my heart anyway. We'd built something real across that distance. She was the one who called at 3 a.m. about boys who didn't deserve her. She was the one who commented first on my Instagram posts, who remembered my work anniversary before I remembered it myself, whose absence from a group chat would have felt like a light going out. We texted daily, real conversations, not just logistics, not just check-ins. We told each other things. I meant it when I promised I'd be at her wedding, not the casual kind of promise where you say things and hope they work out. The serious kind, where you've already started calculating how many extra hours you'd need to bill, how you'd manage the time off, what you'd cut from your budget to make it happen. The wedding was scheduled for May 10th. I booked a flight immediately, confirmation number saved to my email, calendar blocked off with little reminders. 5 hours by car, or an hour by plane if I booked it right. I was going to be there. I was going to watch my little sister marry someone she loved, and I was going to be present for it, in a way that would heal something in me that had been breaking. For 2 months, I believed that would happen. For 2 months, I made plans around that wedding, like it was the thing that would save me, like being there for her would prove that I mattered to someone, like showing up would fix everything that had been broken in my family for 42 years. I called her back the next day to hear more about him. His name was David. They'd met at university. He worked in tech. He made her laugh. She was happy, really happy, and I could hear it in her voice. "I'm so glad you'll be there," she said. "It means everything to me." I wouldn't miss it, I told her. Not for anything. And I meant it. I was naive about what was coming. I didn't know my best friend would die in 3 months. I didn't know my cousin would turn on me when I told her about that death. I didn't know my family was planning to sell the only house I'd ever felt safe in without asking me about it. I just knew I'd promised Loretta I would be there, and I meant it. I always kept my promises. That was what I did. That was who I was, the one who showed up, the one they would come to regret underestimating. It was March when my daughter mentioned it casually over dinner. We were talking about something small. Her day at school, my project in Portland, whether we had enough milk for breakfast. Then she said, "Loretta mentioned she's glad you're not stressed about being a bridesmaid, since things are tight for you right now." I put down my fork slowly. "What?" I asked. "She said she didn't ask you because she didn't want to put you in that position, given your financial situation." My daughter said it matter-of-factly, "The way you report information you don't yet understand is hurtful." But I understood immediately. I understood that Loretta had made a decision about my role in her life without asking me, that she'd assumed, that she protected me by excluding me. I had told Loretta one thing: the engagement party was out of reach financially. I'd been honest about that one thing because I was trying to rebuild my life with integrity, not lies. But I'd never said I was too poor to be a bridesmaid. I'd never implied that I couldn't afford to stand next to my little sister on her wedding day, wearing a matching dress. She'd made an assumption. A compassionate one, maybe, but an assumption nonetheless, and she'd used it to make a decision about my role in her life without asking me. I didn't yell at my daughter. I didn't call Loretta in a rage. I just sat with it like I was examining a structural report that didn't quite add up. I was trying to find where the load was distributed wrong. What distinguished them from me wasn't just distance, it was assumption. The other bridesmaids, her older sister Catherine, her friends from university, the cousins from Calgary, they all looked like they had their lives together. They looked stable. They looked like they could afford to throw down for matching dresses and bachelorette parties in expensive mountain towns without thinking twice. And I looked like I couldn't. So Loretta had protected me by excluding me, by deciding that my role was to show up and be grateful for being included at all, not to stand next to her in the pictures where people matter most. The hurt was quiet. It didn't scream. It just sat in my chest like a stone that wouldn't dissolve. But I made my peace with it. I told myself that it didn't matter. What mattered was the wedding itself. What mattered was being there. I still believed I would be there on May 10th. I still believed that showing up would mean something. I still believed that love could overcome assumption. I was wrong about all of it. But I didn't know that yet. I just sat at the dinner table with my daughter and told her it was fine, that Loretta was probably right, that it was better this way, less stress, that I understood. And I did understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that even the people who loved me were capable of making me invisible. I understood that compassion could look like exclusion if you were the one being excluded. I understood that my financial struggles had become the story of my inadequacy in their minds. What I didn't understand yet was what I would do about it. 3 months before the wedding, my phone rang with words that scrambled everything into a new configuration. It was Marcus's sister. She was calling to tell me my best friend was gone. Not someday, not eventually, now. A heart attack at work. He was 45 years old. Marcus. The one who'd been at my wedding when nobody else from my family had bothered. The one who'd checked in when I was going through the divorce. The one who'd been my solid ground for almost 2 decades. The one whose voice I expected to hear again, soon, when I was back in Seattle and we could grab coffee and catch up properly. Instead, he was dead. I remember not understanding the words at first, not processing them as language, just hearing sounds that didn't make sense in the normal order of how the world worked. Marcus wasn't supposed to die. Marcus was the reliable one, the one who showed up, the one who made you feel safe just by existing. He couldn't be gone, not now, not when I was finally starting to rebuild, not when I was almost ready to believe in good things again. But he was. The funeral was scheduled for May 8th in Seattle, 2 days before Loretta's wedding, 2 days before the thing I'd promised myself I would be present for, no matter what. 2 days of grief and goodbye, 250 miles from the wedding I'd already committed to, already planned around, already promised I would attend. I booked a flight to Seattle without thinking about it. My hands just did it, the way your body knows what to do before your mind catches up. I called Loretta from my car in the parking lot of my office. My voice was steady but hollow, the way voices sound when they're carrying something too heavy. "My best friend died," I said. "The funeral is Wednesday. I need to go. I'm so sorry." I expected sadness. I expected understanding. She'd met Marcus twice. She'd heard stories about him for years. She knew how much he mattered to me. She knew that showing up for a funeral was showing up for something that couldn't be rescheduled, something that mattered more than any other commitment. What I didn't expect was the sound of her voice changing, cooling, becoming something I didn't recognize, becoming something that sounded like my mother. I realized then that I'd made a mistake. I'd believed that because she loved me, she would understand. I believed that grief was a universal language everyone spoke. I believed that my best friend's death would be treated with the gravity it deserved. But I was about to learn that grief is only valued when it doesn't inconvenience people who matter more than you do. "Where are all these excuses coming from?" Loretta asked, and her voice had a note in it I'd never heard directed at me before. "Out of nowhere, suddenly your friend dies right before my wedding? Suddenly you can't come?" I tried to explain. I tried to make her understand that grief doesn't announce itself on a calendar, that Marcus was gone and I was in free fall, that you don't choose a funeral based on whether it's convenient. Instead, she unleashed everything she'd been holding, not just about the wedding, about the bridal shower I'd missed in March because of a crisis at work, about the bachelorette party in Whistler in April that I'd declined because I couldn't take the time off and couldn't afford another trip on top of everything else I was drowning in, about the engagement party, about the pattern she was seeing, collecting, examining like evidence. "You were so distant last year when you were going through your divorce," she said, her voice cracking with something I couldn't quite identify. "I was there for you, and now when it's my turn, you're just gone. You're always gone." "Loretta," I said quietly, "he actually died. This isn't convenient. This is real." "I know he died," she said, "and I'm sorry, I am, but you've been canceling on me for months. First the shower, then you couldn't come to the bachelorette, and now the actual wedding. How am I supposed to feel?" Then she said something that made me go very still. "And when you got married, Dad was the only one who came, but I'm coming to your divorce." The hurt in that sentence ran backward through time like a weapon. She was keeping score. She was tallying up my failures and comparing them to her presents. She was calculating the debt I owed her, as if grief and divorce and the basic logistics of existing across state lines could be measured against love. As if love was an accounting problem. I wanted to say I was barely surviving. I wanted to explain that when you're drowning, you don't attend optional social events. You don't have the emotional capacity for celebration when you're trying to figure out how to keep your own house. You don't show up to bachelorette parties in expensive mountain towns when you're paying a mortgage alone for the first time. But what came out instead was, "I'm sorry, I know I wasn't present last year. I apologize for that." I'd already apologized for my divorce, for being emotionally unavailable while I was trying to reconstruct my entire life. But I apologized again, as if my guilt could be large enough to contain her anger. It couldn't. "I have to go," Loretta said. "I have to start telling people you're not coming." She hung up. The next morning, I checked the wedding website. My RSVP had been changed to "does not plan to attend." She'd made the decision for me, on a website where it would be real and documented and unchangeable. She'd decided that I wasn't going to be there, and she'd decided it without giving me a chance to explain, without giving me a chance to fight for her, without giving me a chance to show her that I would move heaven and earth to be there, even with Marcus dead, even with my heart breaking. It felt like the final word in a conversation I'd never wanted to have. It felt like confirmation of something I'd always suspected, that I didn't matter, that my presence was a burden, that my love was never enough. But I was wrong about that too. "Where are all these excuses coming from?" Loretta asked, and her voice had a note in it I'd never heard directed at me before. "Out of nowhere, suddenly your friend dies right before my wedding? Suddenly you can't come?" I tried to explain. I tried to make her understand that grief doesn't announce itself on a calendar, that Marcus was gone, and I was in free fall, that you don't choose a funeral based on whether it's convenient. Instead, she unleashed everything she'd been holding. Not just about the wedding, about the bridal shower I'd missed in March because of a crisis at work, about the bachelorette party in Whistler in April, that I'd declined because I couldn't take the time off and couldn't afford another trip on top of everything else I was drowning in, about the engagement party, about the pattern she was seeing, collecting, examining like evidence. "You were so distant last year when you were going through your divorce," she said, her voice cracking with something I couldn't quite identify. "I was there for you, And now when it's my turn, you're just gone. You're always gone. Loretta, I said quietly. He actually died. This isn't convenient. This is real. I know he died, she said. And I'm sorry, I am. But you've been canceling on me for months. First the shower, then you couldn't come to the bachelorette, and now the actual wedding. How am I supposed to feel? Then she said something that made me go very still. And when you got married, Dad was the only one who came, but I'm coming to your divorce. The hurt in that sentence ran backward through time like a weapon. She was keeping score. She was tallying up my failures and comparing them to her presents. She was calculating the debt I owed her, as if grief and divorce and the basic logistics of existing across state lines could be measured against love, as if love was an accounting problem. I wanted to say, I was barely surviving. I wanted to explain that when you're drowning, you don't attend optional social events. You don't have the emotional capacity for celebration when you're trying to figure out how to keep your own house. You don't show up to bachelorette parties in expensive mountain towns when you're paying a mortgage alone for the first time. But what came out instead was, I'm sorry. I know I wasn't present last year. I apologize for that. I'd already apologized for my divorce, for being emotionally unavailable while I was trying to reconstruct my entire life. But I apologized again, as if my guilt could be large enough to contain her anger. It couldn't. I have to go, Loretta said. I have to start telling people you're not coming. She hung up. The next morning I checked the wedding website. My RSVP had been changed to does not plan to attend. She'd made the decision for me. On a website where it would be real and documented and unchangeable. She'd decided that I wasn't going to be there. And she decided it without giving me a chance to explain. Without giving me a chance to fight for her. Without giving me a chance to show her that I would move heaven and earth to be there. Even with Marcus dead. Even with my heart breaking. It felt like the final word in a conversation I never wanted to have. It felt like confirmation of something I'd always suspected. That I didn't matter. That my presence was a burden. That my love was never enough. But I was wrong about that too. The website loaded slowly, the way small government portals always do. I typed in the address, 412 Sycamore Street, Millfield, Ohio. The search wheels spun. I set the brass key on the desk next to my laptop and waited. The results came back. Original purchase deed from 1974 when my grandparents bought the place. A refinance in 1998, a satisfaction of mortgage in 2009, and then one more entry, a quitclaim deed recorded 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Exactly when my grandmother gave me the key. I clicked on the document number. The scan took 30 seconds to load. Grainy, slightly tilted on the page, the way county scans always are. At the top, quitclaim deed. Grantor, Margaret Ann Grant. Grantees, plural. Line 1, Diane Patricia Grant. Line 2, Audrey Elizabeth Grant. Tenants in common. I read it again and again, my hands steady, but my heart doing something strange in my chest. Tenants in common. That meant I owned it with my mother. Not as a gift, as a co-owner, as an equal. I wasn't looking at a family tradition or a sentimental gesture. I was looking at a recorded legal instrument that said I owned half of that house. Not symbolically, not emotionally, on paper. Filed with the county, indexed and searchable by anyone with a browser and the address. Nan hadn't just given me a key. She'd given me the deed. She'd done it publicly, through the proper channel, with a notary stamp and a filing number, because she knew, she must have known, that a key can be taken back, that a gesture can be forgotten, that a promise can be unmade, but a recorded document can't be wished away. She hadn't been theatrical, she'd been tactical, quietly, precisely, without asking permission from anyone in the family who would have told her not to. She'd looked at me as a 25-year-old woman struggling to rebuild my life after my freshman year of college, and she'd thought about how to protect me. Not with words, not with promises, with law. I pulled up the rest of the filings. There was no subsequent transfer, no deed from me to anyone else, no court order, no quitclaim releasing my interest. My name was still on that house the same way it had been since the day Nan signed the paper. The county recorder didn't care that I hadn't visited in 3 years. The county recorder didn't care that my family had stopped setting a plate for me. The county recorder only knew what was filed. And what was filed said Audrey Elizabeth Grant was a co-owner. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. I thought about my grandmother, I thought about the day she'd walked me to that notary's office. I thought about how she'd explained, calmly and clearly, that she wanted to add me to the title. Tenants in common. So the house doesn't get tangled up in probate later. And so Audrey has a place that's hers. She'd signed. I'd signed. The notary had stamped it. We'd dropped the original at the recorder's office on the way home. The whole thing had taken 40 minutes. And when we'd gotten back to the house, my mother had been in the kitchen. Nan hadn't hidden it. She told my mother right away. "You're putting Audrey on the deed, not me," my mother had said, her face going flat. "You're already on it, Diane," Nan had said. "Now Audrey is too." My mother had set her jaw. "This is dramatic, Mom. She doesn't even live here." Nan hadn't argued. She'd just said, "The paper's filed, it's done." And now, 8 years later, looking at that scan of the quitclaim deed, I understood what my grandmother had actually done. She hadn't been dramatic. She'd been precise. She'd been thinking 8 years into the future, anticipating a moment she couldn't name but knew would come. She'd understood that her daughter might try to control what she'd built, and she'd filed the paper that would stop her. She'd given me the key, so I would understand it was my home, but she'd given me the deed, so they couldn't take it away. The next morning, my mother called. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. I needed 3 rings to flatten my voice into something normal. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. She sounded warm. She always sounds warm when she wants something to go smoothly. It's a voice she turns on, like a faucet. Warm and interested and concerned. "So, about Christmas," she started, then corrected herself, confused for a moment about the season. "I mean, I know the wedding is in May, but we should probably talk about later this year. We're thinking about keeping things small, just the 4 of us. But if you're back from your projects by late in the year, you could swing by for a visit." A visit. Not an invitation to the actual day. A visit. Leftovers, scraps from the table that mattered. I held the phone away from my ear for a second and looked at the deed scan, still open on my other monitor. There it was, my name, the official record, impossible to deny. "That sounds fine, Mom," I said. "I'll check my schedule." "Perfect. Don't bring anything fancy. Just yourself." She laughed. I didn't. I said goodbye and hung up and sat very still for a long time. The worst part wasn't the lie. I'd been lied to before. About schedules. About why I wasn't included. About whether they'd received the gift I'd sent. The worst part was how easy it was for her. The rhythm of her voice. The warmth she manufactured. The little laugh at the end. All of it practiced. All of it aimed at keeping me exactly where I was. Far away, uninformed, and grateful for scraps. She didn't even hesitate on the details. No pause. No stumble. No flicker of guilt. Just the words delivered smooth, like she was confirming an appointment. Like she was reading a weather forecast. I saved the call log. Not the audio, just the timestamp. May 4th, 9:47 a.m. Duration, 2 minutes and 11 seconds. 2 minutes to lie to your daughter. 2 days later, Brooke called. My younger sister. She didn't mean to tell me anything. She just talked too much. The way she always does when she's nervous. She started with small talk. Her job at the salon. A guy she'd been seeing. Then she mentioned Nathan. And her voice shifted. "He's been really stressed," she said. Nathan ran an auto body shop on Route 9 outside Millfield. He'd opened it 4 years ago with a loan co-signed by my mother. I didn't push. I didn't need to. I just listened while she assembled the picture herself. Nathan's business was going under. The bank had sent letters. My mother was on the hook because she'd co-signed the loan. If he defaulted, she'd be ruined. Her credit destroyed. Her retirement threatened. Everything she'd built in 40 years at the mercy of a business hemorrhaging money. And selling Nan Margaret's house, a paid-off property, no mortgage, no complications, was the fastest way to cover the gap. A 2-story clapboard on a 1/4 acre in a market like Millfield might bring $250,000, maybe $270,000. Enough to clear the loan, enough to bail Nathan out, enough to get my mother off the hook, enough to matter. There it was, the shape of the thing I hadn't been able to see until I searched the right database, until I held the evidence in my hands, until I listened to my younger sister get nervous and talk too much. They were selling my inheritance to pay for my brother's mistakes. And they were planning to do it while I was at a funeral in Seattle. While I was 250 miles away, grieving, distracted, unable to stop them. They'd coordinated the timing perfectly. They'd made sure I was far away. They'd made sure I was busy. They'd made sure I was the last person who would notice what they were doing. I had a deed. I had a county recorder's database. I had a brass key that proved my grandmother loved me more than they ever bothered to notice. And for the first time in my life, I understood what my power actually was. I didn't call my mother to yell at her. I didn't call Nathan to demand explanations. I didn't call Brooke and ask her why she hadn't told me sooner. I didn't call Loretta and ask her if she even knew what her family was doing while she was planning her wedding. I just waited. I went to Marcus's funeral on May 8th. I sat in a church in Capitol Hill and held his mother's hand. I cried for a man who had shown up. I cried for my cousin Loretta, who decided I wasn't worth having in her wedding party. I cried for my family, who were selling the only house I'd ever felt safe in. The funeral was full. Marcus had been a good man, a beloved man, a man who showed up for people. There was a line of people who came up to talk about him, about how he'd helped them, about how he'd been there, about how he'd mattered. That night, sitting in a hotel room in Seattle with Marcus's funeral program on the nightstand, I thought about the difference between people who show up and people who plan around you. I thought about my grandmother, who'd had a stroke at 75, and instead of thinking about her own mortality, thought about protecting me. Who'd filed the paper that would protect me, who'd understood 8 years ago that I would need proof of ownership someday, that I would need something they couldn't take back. The wedding happened on May 10th without me. The photos appeared on Instagram by that evening. Loretta in a white dress, surrounded by people who'd managed to show up, people who were worth the effort, people who had the right kind of financial stability, the right kind of proximity, the right kind of importance. I didn't look at the photos. By May 25th, I knew everything. I'd had a real estate attorney review the deed. I'd confirmed that my mother couldn't sell the house without my consent. I'd confirmed that no title company would clear a closing with a clouded title. I'd confirmed that if I didn't sign a quit-claim deed, the sale would stall hard, especially a week before a holiday, especially when one of the owners suddenly became unavailable. They couldn't force me to sign. They couldn't court me. They couldn't even threaten me legally. All they could do was try to convince me. But I had something they didn't. I had a grandmother who loved me enough to file the paper 8 years ago, not knowing exactly when I'd need it, but knowing that I would eventually need it. On May 26th, the closing was supposed to happen. The bank was supposedly transferring funds. The realtor was supposedly working the paperwork. My mother, my father, and my brother were supposedly about to solve their problem by selling away the only place I'd ever felt like I belonged. I sent one message to the family group chat. A group I wasn't even supposed to be in, because nobody had invited me to join it. I'd been in it the whole time, watching them coordinate around me. I know about the house. My name is on the deed. The closing won't happen. Your real estate attorney will explain the rest. I hit send, and then I blocked the group chat. The calls started immediately. My mother, my father, my brother Nathan. All of them calling in panic. All of them calling with explanations and apologies and requests and demands. I didn't answer. Loretta called me 3 days later. Mom told me everything, she said. She told me about the house. She told me what you did. I waited. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry for being angry at you. I'm sorry for not asking what was really happening. I'm sorry for my family. You didn't know, I told her. They made sure of that. But it's okay now. I know. And it changes everything. What it changed is simple. My family had to come to me. They had to ask. They had to negotiate. They had to treat me like I mattered. Because now suddenly, I did. The closing got delayed, then delayed again, then canceled. I hired a real estate attorney. We started talking about what the property is worth, what it means, what happens next. My mother and I had conversations we should have had years ago. Hard conversations. Honest conversations. Conversations where she couldn't smooth things over with a warm voice and a little laugh. If you're watching this right now, and part of you is doing the math on your own family, who would notice if you went quiet, who only calls when they need a signature, what you own that they want but can't take without you, I see you. Subscribe and stay with me. Because what I found in that county database is exactly why I never raised my voice. Not once. Because quiet people have documents. Quiet people have filed the paper that proves they existed. Quiet people have a grandmother's key and a recorded deed, and all the power that comes with something your family forgot to check.